Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today as you get ready to head out for your holiday season. We appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Those that are not on the call yet, they'll be able to catch up on the recording, but we'll get this going. So this is our part 4 of our webinar series called Did You Know ICE Could Do That? I'm Elizabeth Wojcik. I'm the Director of Client Strategy and Development for CSI. I have the pleasure of working with several of you as an account manager. So the majority of those on the call today already own ICE and have had it for several years. So like we review each time, we feel that some of our ICE clients just, aren't going in there on a daily basis to see what different implementation options they can change. So we wanted to just give you a refresher on what's available and how to use ICE to its fullest capabilities. So we're hoping that you will learn something that you can do in your ICE system to modify, enhance, or identify creative ways to use ICE. So this will be recorded so you can go back and review it later if we go through anything too fast. All right, as I do each time, I want to point out that we have made considerable updates to the ICE user manual. It's easily accessible from your ICE admin site. We've made it a priority to keep this user manual up to date so it can be helpful to you whenever you're troubleshooting. I want all of you to look to this manual when you are troubleshooting or dealing with an issue. If you don't find what you're looking for or directions in the user manual, please let me know or send it in when you're sending in a ticket so we can make sure that's added in the user manual so we can help you even faster. Again, for those that are kind of new to the ICE product, we want to do a little refresher. Many of you don't call it ICE. You've given it a new name. ICE stands for Interactive Chapter Experience, and it's best fit for those groups that are chapter-based and have a reporting structure to the national organization. Many of you are using ICE for these main areas listed below, but we want to give you other ideas of how other ways you can use ICE. Also want to give you a background on how we approach ICE implementations. This list contains examples of the main areas that we work together to configure with the organization to make it fit for them. We have discussions with staff to learn how your members flow through your organization and identify requirements for those actions. Several organizations use this opportunity to identify ways to simplify their process and letting the system control the chapter's ability to complete certain tasks. Much of this is established during your initial implementation, but a lot of these things can be configured as you use ICE and maybe change your processes later. As we've talked before, we always want to do a process of implementing or testing things, but ICE gives you the ability to do some testing in live, but hide it from those users until you're ready for it to be used. So it's really nice to be able to just build it in live, and that way you won't have to build it again if you build it in test first. We can also do a refresh process where you build it in live, we refresh test, and we can test any of those processes there. I usually recommend that for things with financial components or things that update a record that you wouldn't want their live information to be affected. So it's lots of things you can update in ICE, and we've gone over several of those areas. So today we're going to focus on security and sitemaps. We'll jump right in. So let's first discuss how ICE security works. You start with creating a security group which defines the users in the groups with a SQL statement. Normally this is controlled by committee position codes. You then need to define a security permission that is designated per menu item in ICE to control what users can and cannot do. It is best practice to create security groups as major categories of your users. You want to keep your list of security groups as minimal as possible to more easily manage the security setup. So for example, if you create a security group for every officer position, but end up giving the same access to each of those officers, then you don't necessarily need them to be in separate security groups. They could be in one. You should create a group for those positions, one group, and only create additional groups if you need to further distinguish their access within ICE. So we'll kind of further talk about that. Here's an example. In this case, my executive board officers is a security group. Includes my president, secretary, treasurer, etc. They're grouped into one, as all of them will be able to do the listed actions here. View everything in ICE, submit forms, manage their rosters, manage their officer rosters, all those things. But for my other officer positions, which may include maybe some director level roles or chair roles in the chapter, I only want to allow them to be able to view information in ICE. Don't want them to be able to submit forms or change the rosters. But I may have a special case where one of those other officers, like a director of service or philanthropy, needs to be able to submit their service report. All I need to do is single them out into another group so I can give them that unique permission. The same goes for staff members or volunteers that should be able to complete an additional action. You can separate them into another group to give them the extra permission. In this case, I want my chapter consultants that visit the chapter to be able to submit their reports in ICE, but they may not be able to do other actions in ICE. To create a security group, you will need a code for the security group that is unique. So like in this example, we have exec officers, no spaces in the code. You can add a title for further description, and that just helps you distinguish which group is which in the ICE admin portal. The one per chapter selection is for those groups that will have access to specific chapters only and not all chapters. In other words, your SQL statement should define the prefix or chapter ID that they will have access to. Normally the chapter ID, or otherwise known as group ID, comes from the committee activity that designates them to the position. You then will add the SQL statement that should have two rows, or produces two rows. One's the user IMIS ID, and one is the chapter ID. Keep in mind that the SQL statement may not need to define the member type and/or status of the user, as there are other controls in place that prevent users with certain member types and statuses to perform certain actions. A good example is on a position. You must be an active member and probably a specific member type, and this is set up in your qualifiers when we talked about leadership workflow actions. So your SQL statement may only need to define the position or committee. But if you do not have controls in place to remove somebody from a position when an officer leaves the chapter for resignation or other reason, you may want to include member type and status criteria in your query as a safeguard in case that were to happen. So some examples of some queries here. I have my executive officers group that has the chapter ID identified. You can see group ID as prefix in the code. You may notice that we are using a view in the security group. Your example of security groups may be using a different view, and that's fine. There's several different views that you can use. In this case, I'm using a CSI view that gives me the information I need to find current committee members only. I also have a region volunteers group where chapters are also identified, where I have ID as prefix, but I also have them identified to designated chapters. So even if they have access to multiple chapters, they still need to be linked to each chapter ID if they should only see those unique chapters. My national board group and staff group both have different ways of identifying that the chapter ID prefix will be blank. That is null group ID or null is prefix. This just says that they'll have access to all chapters no matter what. So any chapter that is showing in ICE, they will have the ability to look at that chapter's information. So make sure to test these queries in SQL to make sure they're correct. We hope to be adding a feature within ICE where you can validate as you build the security group and do it all in one place. A few things about security permissions to note. In order for a user to be able to access ICE, period, they must have the permission that is applied to the default or home page of ICE. So if the home page is the dashboard page and it has the view dashboard permission assigned to it, then all users of ICE need the view dashboard permission at a minimum. As we discussed in our last session, there's a new permission called view attachments, and it will allow users to access documents that were uploaded for a workflow or form without having to give them the permission to perform the workflow action or submit the form. Again, you want to define permissions in major categories and not get too granular if possible. So for example, maybe not best to create a permission for every form, especially if everyone is given the same form permission. Maybe just create a submit ICE form permission and only create additional when a form needs to be separated out. So let's look at some examples. So for my security permission 1, I have manage officers. So this is applied to the update officer roster action, and I've given this to the executive officer security group only. So they're the only ones that should be able to do this action. On 2, I have submit ICE form because I want my executive officers group to be able to submit all ICE forms. I've given them this permission. But like I talked before about that director of service, I need a submit service form permission to single that action out so I can give the director of service security group just the submit service form action permission and not the submit ICE form permission. And then security permission 4 for view exec reports is usually in a volunteer section, access only. You can apply this to your executive menu items and give it to staff or national board members or regional volunteers that need to have access to maybe national level reporting. But all in all, guidance here is just to keep it simple, and that just makes it easier to manage going forward. Once you define your groups and your permissions, you then need to give the permission to the group. Here's a screenshot of what that page looks like. You can use the Control or Shift key to multiple select the permissions on the left under Available Role and use the arrows to move them under the selected roles. So any on the right side will be the permissions that this group has been assigned. Also, when looking at under Security and Security Groups Permissions, note that there is a filter option. To quickly see the groups that are assigned a permission, use the filter by typing in the permission code and then select the filter icon to the right to set the match criteria, such as contains or starts with. This is how you can quickly confirm that each of the groups that needs to have the permission is in the list without having to scroll through every permission. Your final step is to give each sitemap menu option a permission or security role. Consider security permission and security role the same. Here's a screenshot of the properties of a sitemap menu option or node, and the applicable permission is selected. If you select multiple security permissions here, so if I had multiple checkboxes checked, ICE will allow any user with one of those permissions checked to access the menu item. So it is treated as an OR relationship and not an AND relationship. We'll review the other sitemap properties shortly. Now, after you have made all your changes or additions affecting security, you should always execute 2 tasks within ICE Admin to refresh and reset the security. These tasks run periodically, but if you want to see the updates immediately, run each of these tasks. The update security task is very quick. Usually the reset person security takes a little bit longer to run. Whenever troubleshooting access issues for a user, this should be your first area to come to. It's under Security, Task, and View User Access. You can enter their IMIS ID or username or search for their record, and you're searching for the person that's reporting the access issue. This way you'll be able to confirm if they are, quote, falling into the correct security group and therefore have the correct permissions. As long as your security group query is correct, 9 times out of 10, it is due to incorrect information in IMIS. For example, their effective date for their committee position may be in the future, they are not on the committee at all, or they have a different position that doesn't give them access that they were expecting. So this is a great tool to do your initial troubleshooting for users. If everything looks good under View User Access, then you should log in as the user. So also under Security Tasks, there's a Login As. You can enter their username or IMIS ID or search for their record here. It will log you into ICE with the same permissions as the user, so you can further confirm what they're reporting. Normally what I see happen is that you can access the menu item without issues. Maybe the user, their web browser is caching an error. Or you may need to run the update security task again if maybe you forgot to do that in your last update, or if something was updated recently, you may want to run them again. Okay, let's talk more about the sitemap. A sitemap is the top menu within ICE and how you control what the user sees in ICE as their options. You can have a different sitemap per chapter type. Normally groups distinguish a sitemap for collegiate or alumni chapters. As you can imagine, there would be several differences in the menu for a collegiate versus alum chapters. So the ability to create a totally separate sitemap or menu can be very beneficial. The Sitemap Editor allows you to easily add new menu options or nodes, delete them, or move them around by clicking on the menu item and dragging it to your desired area. Note that the green plus is to add a menu item, which usually adds it to the next below section. And the small black plus sign is to expand or decrease the submenu. You may notice that if you have a random new node, it's because somebody has clicked on the green checkbox or plus sign and didn't delete that new node that they mistakenly created. When you add or edit a sitemap node, you will have several options on the Properties tab to select. Of course, you need to give the node or a label that the user will see. It needs to be descriptive enough to identify what the node will do, like submit ICE form or submit recruitment report. You can select a URL if the node will have a purpose. You will be able to choose from the predefined ICE URL depending on the action types. You can even enter a different URL that's not within ICE if you want to send the user to another resource. In this case, I would recommend checking the box by opening in a new window, as this will allow them to not lose their place in ICE, and you can direct them to that resource in another tab in their web browser. You can give the node a page title and description, but these are optional. You can also select an icon for the node if desired. This is an image that will appear next to the node and is usually indicative of what the node will do. For example, you may place a $ sign by the financial statement menu item. You can select a content block for the sitemap item. This should be used for pages that do not come with its own content block, such as manage members, manage leaders, or reports that you may have already added a content block for. As we mentioned before, you need to set the security role or permission. And note the visibility options. These can be very helpful when you want to have a menu option not show for all users. Even though they won't have access, they may be curious of what the menu option is for and may be discouraged if they get a no access message when they click on the item. Disabled allows you to disable a menu item without deleting it in case it's maybe just for temporary reasons. For any ICE page that has a step process, which includes manage members, manage leaders, forms, etc., you can access these content blocks from the sitemap. This makes it much easier to make sure you're editing the right content blocks for this item rather than going to the full list of content blocks. That's quite long, and so you can make sure you're updating the right ones. You can also create new content blocks from this area. Once you click on Edit, the content block Edit area will open, and you can type in a whole new content block code to create new. For pages that require searching for a member, the Contact Finder tab will be active. Otherwise, it would be blank. Examples of when this is used is for adding affiliate or return to school members back to the chapter roster, as well as when you're adding new officers. The great thing about this is that you can limit the search results that are produced to make it easier for the user to find who they are looking for. You can even make the search result fields different per page. So if the menu item was for collegiate officer positions, I may want the search results to only include active collegians that are in the actual chapter. Now keep in mind that the qualifiers for the leadership workflow position that we created earlier will apply and will not allow you to put someone in the role that does not qualify. So let's look at some examples. So on the left side screenshot, the search is for an alumna for an advisor position. I may want the search result fields to include maiden name and university name, as it's highly unlikely that the person adding them as a leader will know their member number. Also, since alumni may not be great about updating their name in the database, showing something like maiden name helps them confirm that they have the right person. Notice that I also have criteria for active status and alum member type. I may not necessarily need this, as my positions have qualifiers for these two fields as well. On the right side, I have a contact finder for searching for a collegiate officer. Notice that I'm only showing initiation number, aka member number. The terms used here are demographic definition fields, so you may have different demographic definition fields in your database. But just know that you can make any page that's using Contact Finder unique to that page. The Parameters tab will be active when you have selected to use a Manage Member style page. You will add in the workflow product codes that should be available on the page. The limit is 12, so you may need to have 2 pages for managed members and can group them by category. For example, you may have your affiliate and return to school actions on a separate menu item and have the Add Person to List button there where you wouldn't need it on the other pages for other actions that don't apply. You can modify the fields shown on each page, meaning the information about the members. For example, their name, member type, member number, etc. You can also select a different roster query. So if you're using a Manage Members page for a specific purpose that only affects a specific types of members, you may want to designate a new roster so that the list of members are only for those that are applicable. So here's an example. This is a parameters tab for my Manage Members page for my alumni chapters. And you can see my workflow action codes at the top. The Ignore Pending Future Changes checkbox is if you want to allow transactions to occur on the same member, even if there are other pending transactions open for the member. For example, if I have pending leadership transactions or any other workflow transaction out there, maybe with future dates, I might just want to ignore those for these actions because they do not conflict. I might want them to be able to mark them as a dues paying member or any other action I have available here. But in other cases, for managed members, you may not want them to select someone as a graduate if they've already been selected as a graduate to prevent duplication. The field names for each step can be changed to be more applicable to the chapter type. For example, here for alum members, I show the maiden name and the university, the affiliated school name, as it's more applicable. But maybe for collegiate members, I may show member type and member number. This can be helpful when you want to show specific information about the member so that when they pick or get to the step to pick the members, they can confirm they picked the right member. For some of our chapters that have quite a lot of members on their list, this could be really helpful. Also note the roster configuration drop-down at the bottom is using a different roster than default. So if nothing is selected under roster configuration, it will use your default roster under your ICE admin settings. This is just a good way to help limit the list of members that appear on the page. If you have actions on this page and they only apply to certain members, your roster query can identify those certain members, and therefore you can select that roster. This is somewhat similar to the show applicable members and show all members options on a manage members page, but it really limits what they can even see. Okay. Well, today was a short session. I hope I gave you something that was helpful. We'll go through questions in a little bit. But just a couple more areas we have to cover is profiles and notifications. We talked about it a little bit, but we want to get in a little bit deeper. I also want to get your feedback, and if there's other topics that you feel that I haven't covered, please let me know. I will certainly fit it in for 2016. So we're probably going to look at a date in late January as we all recuperate from the holidays to have another session. Don't forget there's an idea scale page, so if you do have a great idea for an enhancement to ICE, please go online and create an account and submit an idea, but also look at the other ideas that have been submitted to show your support if you would like to see the enhancement in ICE. Another reminder about the user guide, please let me know if you aren't finding what you're looking for. And also another shout out to if you want to be a presenter for a fraternal focus group in January, we'd love to have you present your idea. Just anything that you're working on, it's a great way to share your idea as well as gain some feedback from your peers because they might be going through the exact same thing you're going through. So it's a great way to share each other's knowledge and gain influence from everyone. All right. Brittany, I think we'll open it up for questions.
Well, I think you did a great job, Elizabeth. So
Thank
kudos to
you.
you for that. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to type them in the box and we'll get those answered for you.
And if anybody is about to log off, I hope you all have a really very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I hope most of you that are closing for the holidays enjoy that time off and spend it with family and have a good time. And be safe.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any questions yet, but we do have a great job as always, Elizabeth, and Merry Christmas to you as well from Francis'
Oh,
team.
thank you,
Thank you, Francis.
Francis. I love it. We'll give. That's awesome.
All right, it still doesn't look like we have any questions, but if anyone does have questions, just remember you're always free to email Elizabeth or sales or support at csiinc.com, and we'll get all of your questions answered.
Yes. If anybody submits a question afterwards, I'll be sure to share it with the group so everyone can benefit from the answers. But I hope you found this session helpful and kind of the security myths out there and getting everything a little more simplified. But let me know if you start reviewing your system and want to do some cleanup or changes. I'd be happy to help you through that. And glad you're continuing to use ICE, and we just want you to get the most out of it that you can and look forward to more and more enhancements. All right, Brittany, I think that's it. Thank you so much for your help.
Absolutely. Another great session.
Thank you. Everybody have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.